I'm Andrew Schwartz, and you're listening to The Truth of the Matter, a podcast by CSIS where we break down the top policy issues of the day and talk with the people that can help us best understand what's really going on.
There's a new report out that really caught my eye. It's called the AI Tech Stack, a primer for tech and cyber policy. And you might ask why this caught my eye. Well, if you listen to this podcast, you know that I'm pretty obsessed, like many people are, with AI and certainly with cybersecurity, which we've been involved with here at CSIS for a long time. We're also getting into AI. As many of you know, we have an AI policy podcast that I do with my colleague, Greg Allen. But I wanted these two guests and this report all to myself. So I'm a little selfish here, but I want to introduce them. To discuss this new report put out by the Paladin Global Institute, we have with us Kemba Walden, who's the president of the Paladin Global Institute. And of course, she served in government as the acting United States National Cyber Director in 2023 and in many previous other roles in government. We also have with us Devin Lynch, who's senior director, Paladin Global Institute. And Devin also served in the Office of the National Cyber Director, Executive Office of the President, where he was a director for implementation and assessment. Devin's also worked in a variety of other government roles, including for my former United States Senator, Barbara Mikulski of Maryland. Welcome to both of you all. It's great to have you here, and I can't wait to chop it up on AI and security, because we're talking all the time about AI and how great it is, but you guys are laying out some of the real security risks. So I wanted to ask you, in your report, it actually reminded me of something. Henry Kissinger was a longtime CSIS trustee at CSIS, and around his 100th birthday, I did an interview with him, and I asked him, "What keeps you up at night, Dr. Kissinger?" And he instantly responded that it was AI, and he told me that in the future, countries won't fight over territory, they're going to fight over data. So I want to start out with that with you, and I will go to you first, Kemba. It seems to me that your report speaks to some of the issues that Dr. Kissinger alluded to. Why was now the right time for a report like this?
Thank you for inviting us to come speak with you, hang out with you for a little while. We're passionate about this report and about securing the AI tech stack specifically. The reason why we thought this was the right time is because of the fever pitch around AI right now. I'm young enough, I think. I'm young enough to remember, I'm old enough to remember, when, I prefer young enough.
We'll go with young enough for sure.
We'll go with young enough. When the internet sort of became mainstream. I was a young adult at the time. Email was something brand new when I was in grad school, when I had traveled overseas.
Don't you remember when you were in grad school? This same thing happened to me. They asked me if I wanted an email account in grad school, and I said, well, what would I need that for?
Exactly. It's exactly right. There was an option not to do it. I remember when phones were attached to the wall too, and didn't have them in our rooms. But that was a little while ago, not too long ago. But the whole purpose of it was to communicate. We didn't necessarily think about securing it. And now we're in a whole tangle of mess, right? I've seen over my career just the tangle of mess that we've gotten ourselves into around not just securing our infrastructure, but also the competition for the pieces of our infrastructure, right? So I came up in national security at around a time when we were worried about, and we still are worried about, certain technologies in certain parts of the world being used in our infrastructure. Fast forward, I became a policymaker, and early on at DHS, where I served most of my career in government, I was running what was known then as Team Telecom. It's irrelevant what Team Telecom is, but I was running it. And it was about securing our telecommunications infrastructure alongside the Federal Communications Commission. And the thing I learned was the OSI tech stack in order to be able to think logically through how to think about securing that space. As I became a cyber lawyer, first of all, the tech policy folks, the AI folks, refused to take for an answer from me that I am not an AI person, I am a cyber person. So that I gave up on that. So I decided, okay, I'm an AI person with security at my core. I need something as a policymaker like the OSI model for AI in order to think through what the reasonable security measures could be. But I want to caveat that by saying I am super excited about AI and this new technology revolution. And I just want to make sure it's on the right footing. I mean, it's as transformative as internet was when it came online, pun intended.
For sure. Devin, I want to ask you, given that AI infrastructure vulnerability is squarely in the news because of Iran, North Korea, Russia, China, competition with China, among other issues. What's the main takeaway of your study for policymakers and for private sector tech leaders?
Thank you for the question and for inviting us. The main takeaway is for policymakers to understand the tech stack. As Kemba said, before we interrogate and investigate the solutions, the policy or technical solutions to AI, we need to know what it is. What are we solving for? And as you said, and as Dr. Kissinger's interview with you suggests, we're in a global race and there are the stakes couldn't be any higher. So with the stakes being high, the diffusion of AI, the democratization of this exquisite technology and the capabilities it has now and will have one day, we need to ensure that democratic values, not authoritarian control, guide the future of AI. We need to make sure that the standards and the rules of the roads are set here and set in a way that catalyze creators and ignite innovators to do and build what AI technologies can be.
You know, it was fascinating when I talked to Dr. K. He told me in the future, countries won't fight over territory, they'll fight over data. And that's exactly what you all are talking about. You frame AI security as a layered challenge, but let's back up a little bit for a second. Devin, you described the AI tech stack, and that's in the name of the report. For those of us that don't really know what the stack is, can you lay it out, either Kemba or Devin, both of you?
Very happily. Yeah, I've got product placement over my shoulder too. So there are 5 layers to the tech stack. We go governance, application, infrastructure, model, and data. Let's start at the bottom and build it up. So the data are all the inputs. They're the fuel to the AI engine. These are the corpus of internet data that is being scraped and then fed, collected, processed, and stored into systems to then feed into and train AI models. The next layer is the AI model itself. These are the algorithms and the architectures. You and Greg spoke deeply about this at one of the most recent interviews about the weights and the parameters. The different technical nuances to AI are found in the model layer. Above that is sort of the backbone, the engine of AI. It's the infrastructure layer. These are the cloud service platforms, the specialized hardware like the chips, and the GPUs, the TPUs, but also the energy resources. The whole stack flummoxes without power. Above that, we have the application layer. And the application layer is really where AI comes to life, literally animates these algorithms into a chatbot, into a search engine feature, into a car that drives without a human on the left seat. That's an exciting and dynamic layer of AI. And then above it, encompassing all of the layers, is the governance layer. This is the framework that wraps around the tech stack. It exists to set the standards, the security protocols, legal, ethical principles, and to guide AI safe use and AI safe deployment.
So that governance layer is, all of them are important, right? The data layer is the least developed, but that governance layer for us is key. You've seen over the last few years, at least with NIST standards, we've been trying to inject governance into all the models that we've had. But that OSI model, its initial development did not have a governance layer the way that we're describing it now. So that's really key. People ask, and I don't know if you're going to ask why we have that governance layer, but I just wanted to triple underscore what Devin just described.
Sure. I mean, the report talks about threats AI and emerging technology pose to critical infrastructure, and it speaks to the importance of public and private partnerships in fortifying our infrastructure. Kemba, you talk about everything from poison training data to adversarial model attacks. In your view, what are the most urgent AI security risks that we're not paying attention to yet?
Let's start at the foundation, that data, right? You kicked off our discussion around Kissinger's concerns with AI and the data in particular, and I'll point out that Secretary Chertoff, as the first Homeland Security Secretary, wrote a book called Exploding Data that I use to teach even to this day. It was written a while ago, but it's still applicable. We've seen evidence of other nation states, other countries, really focusing on data before AI became accessible to the general public. So they saw this coming in a way that our technologists saw it, but our policymakers haven't. So we're a little behind in protecting that data layer. The data layer fuels everything that we hope to achieve in AI. And so it's important to get that foundation right. And then that foundation has an impact on that model layer, that infrastructure layer, and application layer. and ultimately the governance wraparound of the entire stack. So things like data poisoning is a real threat. We've seen it. We need democratized data in order to be able to have a good model to train on, right? Data to train on using a good model. We need to make sure that it stays accessible, that the integrity of the data remains intact, and that we don't encourage, or at least keep it vulnerable, encourage adversaries to try to mess with the data layer. Then after that, the next piece that needs a lot of attention, as we outline in our report, is the model layer, right? And you've had these conversations in the past. We've been thinking about it, tinkering with it, but we really do need clear security measures to make sure that that model layer remains as secure as it can be, so that we can drive innovation using AI and allowing AI to deliver all of the things that we hope it will deliver, that we know it can deliver.
I know a lot of people who sit around imagining threats that AI can cause and, all kinds of things. What do you think are the biggest threats if AI systems remain insecure?
I think, and Dr. Kissinger in The Age of AI spoke a little bit to the underlying threat that agentic AI has to what it is to be human. And so I don't mean that in the horrible metaphysical sense, but there is a real challenge ahead, one that we do not know the breadth or the depth of agentic AI. There's a huge push towards agentic AI, but even the most savvy frontier modelers caution a quick approach because we don't know what agentic AI, a super intelligence, might be able to do. It's not just a risk that they could go rogue, which is certainly within the realm of conceivable. It's the stuff we cannot conceive. It's the potential that they might exploit or manipulate the technology, the system, in a way that we don't fully understand or cannot control. There's a critical importance then to put the human in the loop and to have those oversight mechanisms, those standards, those protocols that can set the AI on a course that isn't freewheeling, that is within our control.
Kemba, do you have any opinion on that one?
I have to agree with Devin here. The greatest threat that I see are the things that we cannot see, right? We've had an endemic, a sickness of failure of imagination before, and I want to prevent failure of imagination at this moment, right? We want AI to be able to deliver all the things that we expect and hope that it delivers. And we want to be able to protect it from those things that we are not even imagining at this moment. And as Devin pointed out, people are the most vulnerable pieces of all technology. Technology comes agnostic of value. We instill value into it. And so being able to manipulate the people piece of this highly intelligent tech stack is key, is a significant threat in my view. But it's all the things that we can't imagine.
And let me ask you both about U.S. critical infrastructure. Is it most vulnerable to cyber attacks? Is it also true on a global scale? And how does AI figure into this equation?
To this day, here and globally, the biggest threat to critical infrastructure is the end user. For the CrowdStrike report recently, and as the FBI IC3 publishes annually, the 4 out of 5 cyber intrusions are not from exquisite malware. They're from human error. They're from phishing attacks, credential theft, simple mistakes that scale and move more quickly with AI-powered intrusions. This is why, part of the approach we took in the securing AI section of our paper was threefold. First was to emphasize secure by design deployment of AI systems. We want AI systems that understand the digital ecosystem in which they are about to deploy. Number two, we need capital investments as well in trustworthy, security-focused technologies. The more you can build a market upstream of secure and secure native technologies, the downstream effects will be huge. They'll only be better. From our perspective next to a venture capital firm, we can see this. Those venture capital and private equity investments that have trusted capital principles or are committed to trust, to safety, to security, to investments that are cognizant of the world in which they're about to deploy a product, that's where you see the most net positive, best benefit for both companies and for the ecosystem. The third part of that was so secure by design, trusted capital investments, and a defense in-depth approach. This is why at each layer and specific to each layer, there should be a different approach to securing against data collection, processing, storage threats, against model intrusions, against critical infrastructure or energy security needs.
So we talk a lot about securing data and models, but what about the cloud infrastructure? Is that the next frontier for AI related vulnerabilities?
I think in part. So for the infrastructure layer, there are three pillars in my mind. So the cloud infrastructure is critical. Cloud operations are the backbone of AI infrastructure, but equally important are the energy resources and the specialized hardware, the GPUs, the TPUs. Without energy security, without supply chain independence, we cannot advance and we will not progress AI and AI technologies, AI systems in the way that they're currently being deployed. Yes, the infrastructure layer is the next frontier for AI related vulnerabilities, but it's not just cloud, it's the things, the software that creates the cloud and the energy systems that power it.
Can I just add a couple of thoughts to that? So yes, all of the above, but just to put a finer point on it, we've gone a long way in cloud security. There's still more opportunity for secure cloud. We have GPU systems, we get chips, we have energy, we need all of the above energy sources. We also need water and land for data centers. We need to integrate better physical security with digital security. When we think about data centers, when we think about that OSI tech stack, submarine cables, all of the things that we care about and need to secure our critical infrastructure are even more important at this moment in time for AI and that infrastructure layer.
Yeah, when I think about the data centers and all the data centers we need to build here in the United States, and also that some of our Gulf allies are building on our behalf, you think about that vulnerability that Dr. Kissinger mentioned, that, some of these facilities could be bombed. And is that an act of war? Is there an electronic attack? I mean, that's what we think about when we think about these vulnerabilities, right?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. I think Kissinger was before his time in a lot of ways.
It's incredible that 100 years old, he's writing a book with Eric Schmidt about AI. I always was just fascinated by it. And they were working on another one before he died, I believe. Kemba, I wanted to ask you, you argue that governance needs to be embedded across the entire stack, but who should lead that effort? Government, the private sector, or a combination of both?
It has to be a combination of both. This is one of the first technologies where government didn't come out of government, didn't come out of DARPA or ARPA or whatever it is, right? It didn't come out of the need for the warfighter. And so we need both. The government has some bespoke authorities to be able to move markets in a way that the private sector can't. But it's the private sector's technology that's been leading here from the very beginning, machine learning all the way through to agentic AI. So we need both. But when we think about governance, and I think about governance in terms of who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what, we need a belly button. When I was a national cyber director, acting national cyber director, one congressman affectionately told me, I need one person, one throat to choke, right? So there needs to be a key point of responsibility and accountability for securing the AI tech stack and for driving it further, right? I think that's the government in a lot of ways, but that can't happen without a partnership in the private sector. I don't know if Devin has thoughts about that.
Yes. Near-term history supports an approach that is as Kemba described. So we invented the internet, then 15 years later, the TCP/IP, the internet protocol became standard, and 1983, the internet was born. But it wasn't for another 15 years that SSL and TLS, the site sockets layer, the transport layer security, the secure protocols emerged from Netscape, for SSL, or from the IETF created, transport layer security. These secure protocols remain today. They've been updated, as they should. It's a dynamic process when you're updating and creating security protocols. But we don't yet have that with AI. We have seen out of Anthropic, they created the Model Context Protocol, the MCP, which look at the layers, it allows the model to talk to the application, the model to talk to the data. That is huge because that is the principal communication of an AI system.
I mean, all the AI safety folks absolutely love that and love Anthropic for it.
Yes, and bravo to them and to Gemini and others for whom this has become the industry standard. So then to my mind, where's MCP-S? How do we make that a little bit more secure by default, a little bit more like HT HTTPS became the new standard that not just financial transactions, but all internet traffic is starting to use. I think that kind of effort that is the product of industry's brain power and talent, but adopted and collaborated with at the federal and government level is essential.
Kemba, as a senior U.S. official in the executive branch, you've been really close to Congress on cyber issues and technology issues. How should Congress and the executive branch think about this layered approach in terms of defending critical infrastructure now, but also in terms of the entire AI tech stack?
So we need to have our policymakers, particularly those in Congress, understand the tech stack, right? It was crafted with people like me and members of Congress alike. First, you have to understand it and understand how they relate to each other before you start to require certain security and safety protocols. I'll note, I think I heard just a few hours ago, that the moratorium on AI regulation in the states has been voted down out of the Senate. Whatever your politics are, that may be good news or bad news. What I think the opportunity here is that we need a federal law around securing and making the data model infrastructure application and governance part of the tech stack secure, right? We need to make the entire thing safe in order to make sure that we are promoting innovation, that it can be durable and withstand attack or degradation in the future, that we can allow people to have good access to be able to do things like invent new medicines or delivery of pharmaceuticals, that kind of thing. But I think there's an opportunity here. We missed it in the 80s and 90s when we were really pushing through making our digital transformation, making our critical infrastructure relying on our digital infrastructure. I think we have an opportunity to front load this at this moment. I think Congress can do a lot of good here to make sure that we have us set up appropriately for success in the future. Hopefully this tech stack, the intent is that this tech stack will be helpful.
So, speaking of innovation, I wanted to ask you all about the private sector a little bit more. Accenture just did a pretty interesting study where it shows that 36% of security and technology executives who were surveyed said that AI is outpacing their security capabilities. There's always a tension between innovation and regulation. So how do we get this balance right?
The key to finding frameworks that work and evolve with the technology and that encourage innovation is to set clear boundaries for safety and accountability. So the governance approach we took in the report is to move from rigid regulation to dynamic protocol development. And I think this is going to require a little creativity, to Kemba's point about the current debate, the active debate in Congress. Right now, the answer is doing nothing, but that's not, in my opinion, the right answer. There are instances where a regulatory sandbox or a tiered compliance model to ease the tension and strike the balance between regulation and innovation. But there's, I'm old enough to remember there was a TV show called MacGyver back in the 80s. And
yeah, I think we all remember it on this podcast.
And to MacGyver something is to do something creative with constraints. And the most creative paperclip and some, Clorox bleach, he can find his way out of a jam. The most creative a human can be is when constrained. So I push back the idea that nothing is the right answer, but we certainly need to be flexible in whatever the approach that's taken.
Yeah, Kemba, how do we move towards a more dynamic approach in legislation around AI?
You've got to understand what we're trying to legislate. That's the bottom line. You got to understand what we're trying to create policies around. And I'm hoping that this tech stack is the beginning of a conversation. And we have to make sure that we legislate in a way that will allow evolution, right? I'm a lawyer. Laws take time to catch up to technology. It's just a fact. We need to make sure that we have broad guideposts and allow the CISOs of the world, who are more and more becoming the AI center belly button in their enterprises, to be flexible based on their business objectives, right? At the end of the day, the whole point of securing all this is to make sure that enterprises are able to deliver the services and products to their communities. This is just giving them that foundation. So I talk to CISOs all the time, and they make this complaint, right? Like they are integrating AI faster than their security systems are allowed to, or are keeping pace. The first thing I always say is to ask, and I say this to boards as well as CISOs, to ask, first of all, where's the AI in your system? Because it's there. It always has been. You need an inventory of it. And then when you start integrating AI, remember, it's just a string of code at the end of the day. Treat it like code. When you put new code into your system, you test it, you look at it, you integrate it slowly, you do change management, do all the things that you know are the right things to do. And then when you are trying to use it for intended purposes, right? Make sure you understand why you're using it. You're using it to make your accounting software more efficient. You're using it to make your SOC more efficient. Whatever it is, make sure that you understand what it is doing in your system. But we need to put some general guardrails. We have in the last Congress, I think it was, or the Congress before last, we had the bulk data rule passed, right? Where third-party data brokers can't sell data to adversarial nations, right? There's a start. We need rules like that in order to be able to give a little restraint, as Devin was describing, in order for people to be more creative. The more you trust where that data is, the more creative you feel comfortable exploring how to use AI in your system. So I agree that there has to be a balance between innovation and regulation, but there has to be some regulation.
Kemba, we all remember the hearings on Capitol Hill about social media where the members were confused about how to friend people and so forth. It seems to me that the members are a lot more educated and, shall I say, hip to the challenge of AI. You mentioned that they need to understand it. Are there really solid efforts? I know then leader Schumer launched an effort to better understand AI, but what's been the follow-up to all that? And is there enough AI education up on the Hill right now in terms of safety, in terms of security, in terms of all the things that you guys are mentioning here?
I argue that there could be more. So I know there are programs that are effective, like the Schumer activity was effective in educating members. I know that there is a tech fellowship that's being offered to attract recent grads or application native grads into policymaking to be able to advise members and senators on the Hill. There's a proactive outreach. You see every hearing, you have the CEO or the co-founders of Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever it is, Microsoft, all of the tech companies are talking about AI even when the topic is not AI. So you see there's a energy on the Hill for really trying to understand it. And I applaud members and senators for trying to get it right. And there's an opportunity here. We are all becoming app natives at this moment in time, right? We do searches online, our devices in our hands are able to do things and anticipate things and predict things. So we're familiar with it. ChatGPT came on and made AI accessible to the public. What's missing is the stack, like understanding how the data relates to the model. What is a model? What are the parameters? What are the algorithms actually doing? What are weights? What is the infrastructure? What does water have to do with anything? These are the pieces that I think are not tangible to our everyday lives. They're not native to, or they're not organic for policymakers to be able to understand that it's not just the application, it's all of the pieces and how they relate to each other. And then there has to be, this is where Congress has the most leverage, there has to be accountability and responsibility somewhere in the system. That's that governance layer. That's where I think Congress really can make a huge impact.
So I think you've both answered this question, but I want to ask you a final question. If there's one thing that you want listeners, whether they're lawmakers, technologists, or just curious citizens, to understand about securing AI, what is it?
For me, it is use it. Well, this is an inflection point right now from my point of view. And it is a great opportunity to make some breakthroughs that we can't even foresee at this moment. So I want the public to know that they should use it. But we need to do so safely, securely, ethically, and responsibly, right? We need to make sure that the car that we buy has brakes in it so that when we go fast, we know that we can stop when there's a hazard ahead, right? So use it, but use it understanding what the it is. That's what I hope for the public.
That's a great analogy. Devin, over to you.
They'll say AI is an incredible and powerful tool. And once we understand, just like if you got a tool from the big box store down the street, once you understand how the saw works, it can cut through diamonds. That's incredible. Once we understand what the AI is and what it can do, we are at the dawn of an age that will be an inflection point. We literally cannot predict how great it will be, but we do know that the capacities for greatness are immeasurable. And that's really exciting. That securing AI is happening now. It's not all doom and gloom. We have a huge opportunity as a society, as a nation, to advance comma, and that is exciting.
I want to thank the terrific authors of this report. Again, the report is called The AI Tech Stack, a primer for tech and cyber policy. The link will be available in the notes of this podcast, but I really want to thank our guests, the authors of the report, Kemba Walden, president of the Paladin Global Institute, and Devin Lynch, senior director, Paladin Global Institute. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this critical set of issues.
If you enjoyed this podcast, check out our larger suite of CSIS podcasts. From Into Africa, The Asia Chessboard, China Power, AIDS 2020, The Trade Guys, Smart Women, Smart Power, and more. You can listen to them all on major streaming platforms like iTunes and Spotify. Visit csis.org/podcasts to see our full catalog